What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So yesterday, something very strange happened with Nintendo for the first time, revoking a system firmware update for the Switch, and it's kind of leaving everyone wondering what exactly happened. We're going to go over that here today. Also, we're going to be talking about Ratchet Clank Rift Apart. It's out this Friday, and reviews did land yesterday, and things are looking pretty good for the latest game from Insomniac, and we're also going to talk about Playdate, as we got a bunch of new information around this little handheld with accessories and a bunch of games. Might be the quirkiest system I've ever seen. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Scarlett Nexus. It's coming out later on this month, and we know, it seems anyway, Microsoft has like a marketing deal with them. The demo went to the Xbox platform first, and we see the Xbox logo and marketing all over the game whenever we see it from Bandai. And that's kind of led to some rumors around it maybe going to Game Pass day one, as Microsoft has been pretty aggressive with third-party games going to the service on release with Outriders and even MLB The Show. Well, it looks like we do have a response here from Bandai, this to VGC. We can head over here where they say, we have no plans to bring Scarlett Nexus to Xbox Game Pass at this time and are excited for its launch on Xbox Series X, S, Xbox One, PS5, PS4, and PC on June 25th. So there we have it. At least for now, we shouldn't expect it to go into that service day one, but we have been surprised even a week out from when the game is going to release with Microsoft saying, oh yeah, that's in Game Pass. I mean, we've even seen games get announced for the Xbox and immediately go into Game Pass with something like Octopath Traveler. So I guess you never really know, although this is a brand new game at the end of this month going to a bunch of different platforms, so they might want to announce it a little ahead of time if they are going to do that. And hey, E3 is right around the corner, so maybe Bandai's setting us up for a big surprise. Also, we do have Summer Game Fest with Jeff Keighley tomorrow, and we're expecting a bunch of big game announcements. I will be streaming this event, and I'm really looking forward to it, mostly because while we're going to have a ton of games at E3, Jeff is kind of talking this one up, although he does that with a lot of his events, but he did say we would see some big updates with games we already know about. And take a look at this one on Twitter. We can see it looks like Hideo Kojima has a pass for Summer Game Fest, and this has in turn led to speculation around maybe a PlayStation 5 version or just an updated Death Stranding that we could see announced here. And if you think about it, Death Stranding would be really interesting with the DualSense controller. I feel like Hideo Kojima would take advantage of that thing completely with some of the more interesting things I'll say you can do in Death Stranding. Obviously, you have to do things like rock the baby Lou when you drop Lou across like a hill, back to sleep and calm Lou down, but you also have to balance different pieces of cargo on your back, and it feels like the adaptive triggers would work really well with that. Obviously, all of the rain and things falling would go through the speaker and the advanced haptic feedback, but I like this idea. It's been rumored for a while now, and this seems like a good spot to announce it, but remember, Hideo Kojima and Jeff Keighley are very good friends. Jeff Keighley tells us that just about all the time, so this could also just be Kojima heading there to enjoy the show along with Jeff. Oh, and we had talked about Xbox Game Pass teasing Disney Plus becoming part of Game Pass in some way. It looks like it is a trial setup where if you currently have Xbox Game Pass through till September 30th, you can just activate a 30-day trial with Disney Plus. Unfortunately, if you already have Disney Plus, it won't do much for you. You can't just stack a month on your already subscribed account. But I guess if you don't have Disney Plus and maybe you wanted to watch Loki, you can, I guess, start that up. I was hoping they'd go a little further with this because they've already done this before, but hey, there they are hyping up another 30-day trial that you can look into and kind of look around Disney Plus and see what you think from there. Just, I guess, make sure you cancel it ahead of the 30 days. That's usually how they get you with those trials. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this weird situation around firmware update 12.0.3 for the Nintendo Switch, as it is no longer available. It was made available for what seemed to be about 12 hours, give or take, and then it was pulled off of Nintendo's server, which means there may be some of you who have 12.0.3 as the latest firmware on your Switch, and others with 12.0.2. It's very odd because then they're both completely up to date. But you know what's interesting? I noticed there have been quite a few updates recently for the Switch that haven't done much of anything. They've just been stability updates, and I've been wondering if Nintendo is preparing the system overall for maybe a major overhaul in general with something like folders, or of course there's the rumored Switch Pro getting thrown out there. But I mean, look at this. This is a list, for example, that Nintendo Life keeps track of as updates come out. And ever since we've had update 12.0.0, which, I mean, that was a full number jump. We didn't really see anything there, and that was right the first week of April, then April 19th, 12.0.1, May 11th, 12.0.2, and then as of the other day, 12.0.3. And all of them are like stability updates or different things. But this one in particular, 12.0.3, we can see Oatmeal Dome, who will generally take a look at kind of the back end of things and see what was changed, kind of goes over this in a tweet saying package 2, which contains OS kernel and key services. This was updated along with SSL, which helps with creating secure connections to a server. And then they also say the bad words list that we've talked about here and there that are mostly just words that they will essentially censor or kind of block out depending on what you're doing with the Switch. But they do kind of write it off here as minor things we really wouldn't notice unless there were issues with it. And it appears there were, as people were unable to download much of anything. Updates, or I guess purchases through the eShop. Things just weren't exactly working correctly. I guess the secure connection, as was mentioned here, may have had an issue with what was updated, and Nintendo had to pull this firmware down. And it does appear this is, I guess, the first time Nintendo's done this on the Switch. And it is interesting to see Nintendo mess around with things so much recently. Like I said, maybe there is something bigger coming here in the future. Because remember, one of those updates for the back end seemed to do a lot with Bluetooth. And we really can't do much with Bluetooth other than, of course, sync up our Joy-Con controllers. And that's why people were wondering, wait a minute, could we get into Bluetooth headphones? Could we do something there? Maybe there are accessories coming up as well that would need to leverage the Bluetooth connection. They had to make sure it was ready for that. Now, the biggest issue right now is some people are just kind of left with 12.0.3, which does appear to have issues. And I'm not really sure what people do. At the time of this recording, we haven't really had an update from Nintendo, and if it was that big of a deal where like nothing was downloading or updating correctly, I assume Nintendo would have expedited this, and it would have been maybe a couple of hours after pulling the firmware down to put a new firmware up in its place. 12.0.3.1 will go to several decimal points now to make sure people know it is an updated version, or maybe they just jump all the way up to 0.4 something there. It was just a very strange situation to see, and I will just kind of keep up to date with this one with Nintendo to see if they eventually put out an updated firmware, hopefully in the next 24 hours after this video goes up. Hopefully, by the time this video goes up, they'll have already at least mentioned it in some way. But if you want to keep up to date with this one, I guess follow me on Twitter, because I'm sure I'll tweet out about this when Nintendo does update. Next up, let's talk about Ratchet Clank Rift Apart. It's a game I'm very excited for, mostly because every time it's been shown, it continues to look better, and the biggest thing, it actually looks like a next-generation game. I know people said, oh, what about Returnal? What about Demon's Souls? I look at them and I say, hey, they're very good-looking games, but I don't feel like they are next-gen experiences. Like, I don't look at those games and think, oh, those could not run on a PlayStation 4. Ratchet & Clank looks like a game that will not actually work on the PlayStation 4 because the game itself has been designed fundamentally to take advantage of the SSD, for example, in the PlayStation 5. But we can see the Metacritic score here for it currently sitting at an 89 with 97 critic reviews in. So right around now is when I would say the Metacritic score is like basically locked in, as there aren't even that many more critic reviews to come through. And maybe it could finish up at a 90, but an 89 for Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is very, very good. If we go down to the critic split, it's right now 93 positive and 4 mixed with 0 negative scores. And there are quite a few, even hundreds, 90s, 95, like the majority of the list are like hundreds and 90s. And the lowest score that I could find was a 70. Now, like I said, some of those pending reviews could still come through and like, you know, be like a 60 or something. But based on most of these reviews here, Everyone seems very much blown away by this game, but my favorite one was from Digital Foundry with John Linneman, because he went very much in depth with a lot of kind of the core design and technology going into this game. And the most impressive parts are when they were showing things that you wouldn't even think to look at, and just how detailed they are, whether it's like the shells on the ground with the gun you're firing, or these little tiny insects flying around. They zoom in on them and they're like completely detailed to the point where they have full reflections on the eyes of those creatures. But overall, if you go through and you look at some of the video reviews for these, you'll see dimensional shifting as becoming part of like the core concept around the gameplay, especially with things like kind of grinding down rails and shifting between different dimensions so you can continue grinding down and doing different objectives. It's pretty cool. I wouldn't say it's like this crazy, wow, mind-blowing mechanic that we would have never thought of, but it really does show just how interesting the SSD in the PS5, and yes, even like the Series X. I know the PS5 SSD is faster. It's mostly though that shift of going from the old mechanical hard drive that is very slow compared to this SSD, and what we can get from that, not necessarily just what we get from the graphical bump. While that is impressive when you zoom into things like Rivet's tail, for example, as they show, and you see all like the individual strands of fur, the idea of being able to do things fundamentally with the game and shift things so drastically is really the reason I'm so interested in playing through this game. That and it's Ratchet and Clank. They've always been really fun. But I'm picking it up Friday. I was sold before the reviews just from the amount of gameplay that they've shown us, with that state of play even really putting it over the top for me. But let me know if some of these reviews really sold you on the game, because it is $70, and I understand people do look at that with a bit more caution now with games in general. So let me know if maybe some of these reviews or a video review or even gameplay that came out yesterday really sold you on this game. Next up, let's talk about the Playdate handheld. And we've been talking about this thing for a good part of this year after it was initially revealed. It was certainly an interesting looking device with the little crank on the side, and we did get like a full direct style almost, just kind of showing off this device in a bit more detail, along with a bunch of games. In fact, they have now doubled the number of games that you will get with your device. It's like season 1, and essentially what's going to happen here is every week they are going to, over the air, I guess if you're connected through Wi-Fi, push and unlock games for you. So it's going to be interesting to see which ones get unlocked in which order, because they did show all of the games off, but they didn't tell us which one you're going to get first and which one you're going to get last. But the device itself we went over is $179. Pre-orders will start in July, and they're going to give us a week notice, which is good because we've seen what happens when pre-orders just get dropped out of nowhere. Usually it's a mad scramble, and a lot of the times people get left out after things sell out. But they did say that the pre-orders won't necessarily close. They'll just have to extend the overall wait time to get your system as they work to create them going forward. But they also showed off a new accessory. It's a dock. Well, it's a stereo Bluetooth dock, which is it's interesting. I like the idea of it attaching with magnets, and then it will start charging the device, and it has extra speakers on the side, so I guess the Playdate will then be louder, which is cool. And it has a spot for your pens. They're going to give you a Playdate ballpoint pen with it as well. It's mostly designed to go on your desk, which, okay, again, you can see kind of the quirky nature of this system, where they thought of, wow, you might want to put your ballpoint pens with it. Yeah, anyway, here's all of the different games that we have them here listed. This was done by The Verge, and there are quite a few games here that are interesting. Basically, this device is letting indie developers, for the most part, try some very odd things, because obviously it has a crank on the side, so you can kind of see how people can maybe get really creative with that idea. Probably the most exciting game announcement was Mars After Midnight. This is from Lucas Pope, who said he's in very, very early development of this, but he did create Return of the Obra Dinn and Papers, Please. This appears to be a game where creatures will knock on the other side of a flap, and he used the crank to kind of open up the flap and then look through it and see the creature on the other side. Now, we'll have to see what else he has to this game, as it is in very, very early development, but it was kind of cool because as you moved around and looked around kind of the slot, it gave it this sort of depth to the creature itself on the other side as you're kind of panning around is kind of neat. Like I said, this is a device where people who buy it understand these games are probably going to be smaller games, but they're going to be games that try very different things overall. They're not going to be your standard traditional style games. And it goes a little bit further. They're going to also do a program that will allow you to create your own games without necessarily having to code completely. And this is called Pulp, and it will be done completely in your web browser. So that's really cool if you're someone who maybe wanted to try your hand at game design and thought the Playdate looked cool and interesting with this little crank on the side and the different kind of screen. Seems like a great way to take a shot at doing that, and it will be completely free, just again, through the web browser. They're gonna look to launch that later on this year. So the Playdate looks pretty cool. I'll pick it up, and I'm sure we'll do a video here. I understand people are gonna look at this thing and then say $179, but I think they're targeting more of a core or niche audience who's really into indie titles and wants to see what indie developers can do to take advantage of the uniqueness, we'll say, of the system. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Capcom at E3, as they have announced the date and the time that their presentation will take place, along with a couple of titles that we can expect to see there. We'll head over here to Twitter. This was posted up by Capcom USA saying, "Join us for the Capcom Showcase at E3 2021 for news on our latest games lineup, including the great Ace Attorney Chronicles, Monster Hunter Stories 2, Monster Hunter Rise, and Resident Evil Village." That'll be June 14th at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. I will be streaming this because I kind of have to. It's almost tradition now, right? Where I stream it and then I get extremely disappointed that there is nothing Mega Man related there. I mean, they mostly just listed games that we already know about. If they have surprising announcements, they're not going to put them here, right? They're going to be like, oh, yep, Mega Man is going to be there. No, they want to save that for a big surprise reveal. For things like Resident Evil Village, Monster Hunter, they could have more expansions, DLC, or other parts for different story events, things like that. So I'm looking forward to the Capcom event, but my expectations are in check. I'm not expecting to see a new Mega Man Legends or Mega Man X9 or anything like that, but if they could just do something Mega Man, it would be really cool. We'll see about all this, though. Look for that June 14th. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, will Capcom announce a Mega Man game at E3? 74% of you said no, Capcom won't have anything Mega Man related this E3, but 26% of you are on my side here saying yes, it's about time for a new one. It is. It's time for Mega Man X9. Well, okay, we got Mega Man 11, and it was all right. I thought it was pretty fun, but everyone wants Mega Man X9, at least I think. A lot of people want Mega Man Battle Network Collection, which I think was rumored for a little while there. I think it was even mentioned at one point by Capcom in like interviews or something because people were asking for it. That would be really cool to see that, or even maybe just a new one. I don't know. Something Mega Man, Capcom. Come on, make it happen. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Remake saying, man, I can't wait for Ratchet and Clank. Insomniac are killing it. Yeah, Insomniac has really put in the work to start this generation, haven't they? They got Spider-Man Remastered, Spider-Man Miles Morales. They did the update for Ratchet and Clank 2016 to get it to 60 frames per second. Now, here they are with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, the game that a lot of people are pointing to and saying, yeah, that's like the first real next-gen game I've experienced so far. And I mean, if you look at it, Sony bought Insomniac for $229 million. That's less than what Microsoft bought Rare for way back in the day from Nintendo. So that was a very good investment from Sony. I mean, if Insomniac keeps rolling and like next year they have another game to announce and they keep going, Insomniac, I think, is very possible to become Sony's best studio overall, because you're going to see Guerrilla, of course, put out Horizon. You'll eventually see Naughty Dog put out The Last of Us. But like for sheer volume and releases that are high quality, I mean, Insomniac's it right now. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where is this Nintendo Switch update situation? 12.0.3. Let me know if you're currently on that update and if you've been experiencing any issues with updating games or downloading different games from the eShop. Also, what about the Playdate? Are you thinking about picking it up for $179, maybe to develop for it, or just to see what a handheld with a crank can actually do? And then what do you think we're going to see from Capcom at E3? Let me know if those expectations are out of control like me and, you know, you're looking for a Mega Man game. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.